Well, today I'm here to talk about Adam and Eve and what happened in the Garden of Eden. Now, we know that God created Adam and Eve, and he put them in this beautiful garden that he had made for them, and then he put them to work. Can you believe that? What? You say, they didn't have to work. They had it made. They didn't have to do anything at all. They didn't have to go out to a store or earn money. Well, they did. God told them to keep the garden. They were gardeners. They had to keep the rose bushes trimmed. They had to keep the trees pruned. They had to keep everything, and that was their job. But you know what? It was fun because they loved being there and they loved doing their job. Now, early on, God had told them, and even the angels that visited with them, he told them, he says, you two need to stick together. Because you know what? There's strength in numbers. When you're together, you can always be stronger. And anytime temptation comes, you're stronger together than when you're apart. And they knew that. And in fact, God had warned them and told them about Satan. He had told them about the fight in heaven and how Satan had been cast out and Satan was going to try and trick them. And he had told them to watch out and be careful. And that's why he said always stick together, because you're stronger when you're together. Well, day after day, we don't know for how long, but day after day, Adam and Eve, they loved working together, they loved being together, and they were tending the garden. One day, Eve forgot about sticking together. And she was just off minding her business, and she was wandering, and she saw the different fruits and the different trees and the flowers, and she was singing a song in her head, and all of a sudden she heard a voice. It wasn't Adam's voice, but she heard a voice. She says, oh, Eve, come over here. And she thought, what? Is that, maybe it's one of God's angels? She looked around, she didn't see him. Maybe she didn't know. Well, she heard the voice again, Eve, come over here. And then she started going closer, and she realized it was coming from the tree. Yes, God had told them, of all the trees in the garden you can eat, but not that tree. That tree is the one you have to stay away from. But here was a voice coming from that direction. Well, she was curious. She was very smart and intelligent, and she wanted to find out what voice is coming from this tree. So she walked over towards the tree, and she started looking around, and there in the midst of the tree was a serpent. It was a beautiful serpent. Ah, you're asking me again, how can a snake be pretty? What? Maybe some of you like snakes and some of you don't like snakes because, ooh, they give you the creeps. But this snake was beautiful. Before God put a curse on the snake, they could fly. And they were this snake was like a bronze color. It was beautiful, and it was in the tree around the branches. Eve looked closer and she saw the serpent there. And then the serpent talked to her. She was shocked. She was surprised. None of the other snakes had talked to her yet. None of the other animals had talked to her yet. But here is this snake talking to her from that tree that she was not supposed to go close to. Well, her curiosity was aroused. What's up with that tree, and why aren't we supposed to go there, and why is there a talking snake in the tree? As she got closer, the snake said, yes, that's right. Eve, come closer. Let me talk to you. You're beautiful. Let me get a good look at you. And she looked, she's all, how is it that you can talk? Well, the snake started talking back to her more, and he's like, oh, Eve, I have eaten from the fruit of this tree, and that's why I'm able to talk. The snake was lying. Do you remember what God told them about Adam and Eve? How Satan had been cast out of heaven and he might try and trick them. Well, Eve had no idea that Satan would try and take on a form like a serpent. So she kept talking with this snake. And he says, Eve, if you take some of the fruit, you'll be smarter and wiser. Why, you'll even be like God. Like I've gotten smarter and wiser. And look, I can talk. Oh, Eve thought, wow, I could ascend to a higher level. I could be just like God. And the snake says, yes. And the serpent took a piece of the fruit and he stretched out a little bit. His back part of him, his tail was wrapped around a branch, and he reached out to hand the fruit to Eve. Eve at first wasn't sure what to do. All of a sudden she remembered God said, don't take the fruit. But the snake is taking the fruit. The snake's not dead, and what is death anyways? And she reached out and she took the piece of fruit from the serpent. And then she took it in, and the snake, Satan, in the disguise of the snake, he was delighted. He says, yes, Eve, look, you see, you're touching the fruit. Nothing's happening. Didn't God say the day that you touch the fruit, you'll die? Actually, that was a lie. God said the day that you eat the fruit, but the snake, Satan, was trying to trick her even more. And she thought, well, I don't feel any different. Nothing is happening to me. And it was a beautiful piece of fruit. The snake said, go ahead, just take a bite. Take a little bite. You'll see how good the fruit tastes, and you will be changed right away. She thought, okay. And she took the bite of the fruit. This was good fruit. She hadn't tasted this fruit yet. From the other fruits, she'd had some peaches and apples and nectarines and all kinds of stuff. But this fruit, this was different. It was beautiful. It tasted good. She'd take another bite. Ha ha, there's the snake. He's almost grinning, as if a snake could grin. And he's like, yes, Eve, don't you feel different? And in fact, she did feel exhilarated inside. She started to feel a change, and she made herself believe that the change that was starting to happen to her was making her wiser. In fact, it was a tree of knowledge, right? She was gaining more knowledge. She was getting smarter by the minute. She took another bite. That's good. And then the snake pulled on the second part of the trick. Eve, take some to Adam. Show it to him too. He'll feel the same way that you do. Go on, Eve. And Eve thought, oh, this is good fruit. I got to share this with Adam. That's a great idea. So she grabbed another piece of fruit and she took off running through the garden to try and find Adam. She was looking here and there, calling for him, Adam. And then she saw him around the other side of the garden and she went, Adam, Adam, come here. And she went over there and Adam saw her. Eve, where have you been? It's good to see you. And Adam noticed something. First of all, he noticed she had fruit in her hand. And he almost noticed a slight change with Eve. And Eve had a big smile on her face and she says, Adam, you've got to try this. And Adam stopped and he says, wait, Eve, that's the fruit. Eve, what have you done? That's the fruit we're not supposed to eat. And Eve thought, I know, but Adam, I think God was wrong somehow. It changed me. I already feel like I'm wiser and smarter, and I'm changing. And Adam says, Eve, no. Adam was not tricked. Adam knew what he was doing. And Adam loved Eve so much that he decided if Eve had gone against God, that he wanted to be with Eve. And that was one of the sad things about our parents, Adam and Eve, early on. He willingly took the fruit and he took a bite, even though he knew God had told him no. Well, he took the fruit, and pretty soon things started to change. You see, early on, the Bible tells us that when they took the fruit, then they discovered that they were naked. And what exactly does that mean? Because they didn't have clothes yet. God gave them clothes later. Part of their change when they disobeyed God was that the Holy Spirit, and they had a covering of light almost, started to fade away. And that's when they understood that they were naked. Well, pretty soon God started coming into the garden, as he did every evening, to spend time with Adam and Eve. And they knew he was coming. And you know what they did? They ran right behind some trees or some bushes, and they hid. And they were hiding as if God couldn't see them or find them. Well, God played along and he says, Adam, Eve, where are you? Finally, they spoke. He says, over here. And God says, why are you hiding? He wanted to draw them out. Why are you hiding? And he says, well, Adam made the first mistake in marriage. And I know that this will come a long time. But he blamed his wife. He says, actually, he blamed God and his wife. He says, the woman that you gave me tricked me and gave me the piece of fruit, and I ate it. And then God turned to Eve, and he says, what did you do? Oh, well, Eve learned very quickly, if Adam's going to blame her, then she's going to pass the blame on, right? And so Eve says, the snake that you created, she blamed God too. The snake that you created tricked me, gave me the fruit, and I ate it. And this was the very first curse that God put upon this earth. He turned to the snake and he said, you will crawl on your belly from now on. Do you remember earlier I said the snake had wings and it was beautiful? Well, now he would crawl on his belly on the ground. And that was part of his curse. And then God said, and men will fear you. And maybe that's why some of you don't like snakes. Last week, we were in Southern California and we visited some friends. They had 12 snakes inside their home, and some of them were really pretty. One of them was orange and white. It was a ball python. It was a beautiful snake. Well, the snake is now going to crawl on the ground. And then God turned to Eve and he says, when you have kids, when you give birth, it's going to hurt. And he turned to Adam and he says, when you work for your food, you're going to have to work for your food now, because it's not just going to produce on its own. It's going to be hard. And you're going to have to work hard for that. And you're going to sweat. And it's going to be hot in the sun now. And he put a double curse on that snake, because he knew that Satan was impersonating the snake. And he says, someday his heel will crush your head. And he was talking about Jesus coming many years later to finally win the victory for this world and defeat Satan and all of sin. And that's what Jesus did for us. Well, from that day forward, Adam and Eve had to wear clothes. They could no longer have that shimmering covering of light from the Holy Spirit that God gave them. Instead, they put on clothes, and God had to send them away from the Garden of Eden. It was a very sad day for all of them. And then God ordered an angel with a flaming sword to guard the entrance to the garden, so that no one could ever go back into that garden. Well, that's our story for today. I hope you remember that sometimes things comes our way and we may want to disobey God. We may want to disobey our parents. But always remember that God still loves us. Our parents still love us, even when we disobey. And they are always there to help us. I hope you have a good day.